Hey guys, welcome back to Carib 21 Network, wherever in the world you're watching us from. So let's talk about some Jamaica politics. So it's heading into 3 months since the general election on September 3rd. And if this is an indication, what we're seeing so far, the relationship between the Jamaica Labour Party, the governing party, and the People's National Party, the opposition, if this is anything compared to what we're going to have to deal with for the next 5 years, I believe that we can just go ahead and cancel our Netflix subscription, because this politics in Jamaica is just getting festive. Every single day we're seeing like a real housewife type thing scenario playing out in the House of Parliament, and yesterday was no different. So the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Honorable Dr. Andrew Holness, yesterday announced that the government of Jamaica secure a loan to help to rebuild Jamaica from IMF, the World Bank, and other financial institutions. And when I heard that news, I was shocked, because 1 month after the most catastrophic disaster in the history of Jamaica, and for the Prime Minister to be able to secure such a massive loan in such a short time, that is amazing to me. Because even in Hurricane Gilbert in 1988, the damage to Jamaica was $700 million. And it took us a long time to secure any type of loan back then in 1988. So Jamaica, we have come a far way, where in terms of trust in the economy in Jamaica, we can see that the World Bank and the IMF, they trust Jamaica now, the government of Jamaica, that we are going to be in a good position to be able to repay our loan. So that was so amazing to see that after, as I said, 1 month, and we're able to secure that loan. But in the House yesterday, we saw where the opposition leader, Mark Golin, in responding to that, Mark Golin was saying that, look, this is nothing to celebrate. And I could not believe my ears. The opposition leader, Jamaica, just 6 to 7 parishes are completely damaged. Like, I was talking to someone from Westmoreland yesterday, and they say that up to 90% of the electricity poles, they are down on the ground. And for the opposition leader to say this is nothing to celebrate because this is death, that is just crazy to me, to see the opposition leader stand there and say that, look, the fact that we got this $6.7 billion is nothing for the Prime Minister to gloat about, is nothing for the Prime Minister to celebrate, because this is going to put us in debt. This same opposition leader, Mark Golin, that a month ago was talking to the Prime Minister, was saying that, look, all the MPs in Jamaica deserve to get $50 million. So where would that $50 million come from, Mr. Opposition? That is what I don't understand. And you would think that the opposition leader would take a different approach, seeing that the most, like, ground zero, Westmoreland, which the opposition leader himself stated, ground zero, most of that area is People's National Party MPs. They are in that area. I think it's like 3 MPs that represent the People's National Party in that area, and that is described as ground zero. And when you talk to people that go to Westmoreland, and they say like a lot of these houses were like shacks, they were a wooden structure, and they did not stand a chance against a category 1, much less a category 5. And to see that this type of money would ensure that, like, Westmoreland, when we go back to Westmoreland 5 years from now, Westmoreland could look very different from what we know Westmoreland to be. And the MPs that are from the People's National Party in Westmoreland, they are going to benefit the most from this package. So you think that the opposition leader would take a different approach. And when you look at St. James also, Nikisha Burchell is in St. James, and you see Nikisha Burchell, she's out there busy every day trying to plead to people that, look, the schools are damaged. There are a lot of kids in St. James that they're suffering, they're traumatized because a lot of their homes are completely wiped out. So you would think the opposition leader would take a different approach and just say, instead of saying that, look, this is nothing to gloat about, nothing to celebrate about, to say like, look, We're happy that we're able to secure this $6.7 billion. And we, as the opposition party, we stand ready to help the government, to guide the government in terms of the redevelopment of these worst devastated areas like St. James, like Westmoreland. An approach like that you think the opposition would have an approach like that, as I said, because the people that are going to benefit the most from it is someone like a Nikisha Burchell and someone like Dayton Campbell. They are going to benefit a great deal from this $6.7 billion loan. So this was the opposition leader responding to the Prime Minister yesterday.
Madam Speaker, it is a sad situation in the configuration of the affairs of this world that we, living in a small island developing state like Jamaica, are the recipients of the increasingly vicious effects of the climate crisis, a crisis which we did very little, if anything, to cause. The global warming, as a result of the excessive use of carbon and emissions from carbon fuels over the last few centuries since the Industrial Revolution, that global warming has largely been driven by the wealthy economies of the world. And yet we, in Jamaica and other islands like ourselves, are suffering the consequences of that on an annual basis. We were hit by Beryl, or scraped by Beryl. Last year it was a serious hit. And this year we got walloped by Melissa. It's really a shame that the international financial community is still approaching the mitigation of the effects of climate-induced disasters on countries like ours by financing packages that are largely based on additional debt. These debts that we are now going to be incurring to finance our attempts at recovery are like lending money to a business that suffered losses through some kind of crisis that is trying to dig itself out of a hole from. Taking on additional debt to do that is going to be a challenging road for any country. Therefore, I don't think it's appropriate to treat these announcements in a triumphant way. We are in a country which has spent the last 15 years seeking to get ourselves out of a debt trap, where we've had to run massive primary surpluses every year consistently to reduce our debt to GDP ratio, with a target that's written into our law incidentally by a government from this side, which we were anticipating would have been met this year before Melissa struck us. And now we are facing a new era of massive incremental borrowing.
Yes, so that was the opposition leader, Mark Golin. And I'm going to say this. I think Mark Golin needs some good advisors around him. I don't know who are the advisors that's advising him, but Mark Golin is making a lot of blunder. After this election, he's making a lot of blunder, and he need some good advisor around him, because that speech almost sounds like a speech that you would hear at the United Nations General Assembly when you see like Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, or even Andrew Holness himself being at the United Nations General Assembly. Every meeting of the United Nations for the past 6 years that I've been watching every single year religiously, this comes up all the time about climate change. And what Mark Golin needs to understand is that, look, yes, you can argue about climate change, and you can argue that the big countries that contribute to it, you believe that it's not fair that smaller island nation like Jamaica, that we are experiencing these catastrophic disasters because of that. Yes, you can argue that. But at the end of the day, to stand there and to think that the World Bank and the IMF is just going to fork up $7 billion, $6.7 billion as a grant, that is just, I don't know where that thinking is coming from. Because yes, when you look at what happened in North America, you don't even have to go too far. This year, when you look at the wildfires in California, the wildfires in California alone had more damage to that state than this hurricane in Jamaica. And you talk about the wildfires in Canada, billions of dollars of properties completely gone. In LA last year, there were thousands of houses that were burnt to the ground. So yes, talk about climate change, and yes, climate change could be having an impact on the Caribbean, but it's also having an impact on America. And the reality is that the IMF and the World Bank, they are not going to just fork out grants total of $6 billion to give Jamaica to rebuild. So I don't know where that came from. And as I said, I believe that Mark Golding, the opposition leader, needs some better advisors in terms of advising him, writing some of his stuff before he comes out and speak, because that yesterday made absolutely no sense. Okay, so up next, let's take a look at the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the presentation from the Prime Minister announcing this loan and the structure of the loan that Jamaica received, as I said, from the IMF and from the World Bank and other financial institutions.
I rise today to update this Honourable House on the unprecedented level of international financial support for Jamaica following Hurricane Melissa, and to outline how this support aligns with our structured, disciplined and forward-looking national reconstruction strategy. Madam Speaker, the international community has responded to Jamaica with remarkable solidarity, urgency and confidence. Yesterday, the 1st of December 2025, the international financial institutions, the IMF, the World Bank Group, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean Development Bank, jointly announced a 3-year coordinated financing package of up to $6.7 billion to support Jamaica's US dollars, to support Jamaica's recovery, reconstruction and long-term resilience. Madam Speaker, even before the announcement of this substantial international financing package, we already had in place a multi-layered disaster risk financing framework, which was the product of years of strategic planning, disciplined financial management, and proactive investment in resilience. This framework enabled rapid early response and the immediate mobilization of liquidity to meet the most urgent needs following Hurricane Melissa within days. Jamaica activated several instruments across our risk financing architecture. We had approximately Jamaican $5.3 billion in the contingencies fund and $1 billion in the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. We received US $91 million from the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, CRIF, one of the largest payouts ever made in the region. And then we had the US $150 million under the catastrophe bond, triggered immediately based upon parametric thresholds. In addition, we had US $285 million available through the IDB's contingent credit facility for rapid liquidity support, which was upsized to $300 million, and US $42 million scalable to US $84 million available on request under the World Bank's catastrophe deferred drawdown option. Madam Speaker, this totals approximately US $662 million in liquidity that was available almost immediately following the hurricane. This is the very definition of planning, preparedness, and responsible governance. Our multi-layered approach ensured that Jamaica did not wait helplessly for external support. We were prepared and ready to act, ready to deliver, and ready to protect our people. However, Madam Speaker, the scale of the disaster is without precedent in our history. the widespread infrastructure damage, displacement of thousands of families, the destruction of livelihoods, and the long-term economic impacts mean that additional financing is required to support the reconstruction effort and to build a more resilient Jamaica. It is against this backdrop of strong national preparedness that the international community has now rallied behind Jamaica, recognizing that we are not merely seeking help. We are ready to lead, ready to rebuild, and ready to transform.
So let's talk about the 6.5 billion US dollar loan from the World Bank and the IMF to the government of Jamaica. It depends on how you look at it. You can look at it two ways. You can say, look, this is going to push back the Jamaican debt to GDP ratio right up there. And we have worked so hard for 15 years to bring it down. And finally, when we're enjoying some wiggle room, the government was enjoying some wiggle room. Now, this disaster push it right back up there. You could look at it in that way and that, look, this is not free money. This is money that taxpayers are going to have to pay back over time. Or you could look at it in a different light and say, like, look, the infrastructure, the Jamaican infrastructure, we have a crumbling infrastructure, especially in the areas that were affected the most. We're talking about Westmoreland, we're talking about St. James, some of those areas. When you go through Westmoreland and you see all those wooden structure, and you could look at it in a way that, look, the hurricane did us a favor in terms of like destroying some of those like houses that were not desirable. And now the government of Jamaica, if they do the right thing, the government of Jamaica will be able to turn places like Westmoreland into a more desirable in terms of the houses that are going to go there, so that people in 2025, they're not using outdoor washrooms, they're not in these wooden structures that are so weak. And we saw Favour Williams, the finance minister, announcing, I think it was something like 3,500 container homes that they ordered for people that are affected by the hurricane. And I know some people are going to say like, oh, they don't want the container homes. But last year, the container homes were a trend in Jamaica. And those homes are some very beautiful container homes. When you look at those structure, those container homes, they're stronger. They look more chic, more beautiful than some of the wooden structure that you saw in Westmoreland for decades that's been there all that time. So you could look at it that way also. But the reality is, to get $6.7 billion loan from the IMF in such a short space of time, that is amazing. I don't know how many countries, whether in the Caribbean or anywhere else in the world, would have been able to get this loan in such a short space of time. And I know our former finance minister is working at the IMF. So Nigel Clark, so maybe Nigel Clark pulled some string, but I think that this is a good news for Jamaica, and I think that the opposition leader should celebrate this and should ensure that he work with the government to make sure that places like Westmoreland, where Dayton Campbell his area is completely devastated. When you talk about Nikisha Burchell in St. James, they are going to benefit a lot from this money. So guys, sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.